What is up, my friends? This is the Protect Your Neck podcast. I'm your host, Dan Tom, and this is where you can find over MMA Junkie as well as the Action Network. But on this here program, the Protect Your Neck podcast, we break down high-level MMA, but in a slightly different way. As the rare UFC off weeks kind of allow us to do, the sport kind of just moves. Not enough history has been given to it. You're hearing that complaint more and more, which is nice. And it's also more motivation for us to be doing something that we've been doing here on this here program for quite some time now. And not as steady as I would like to, hence the UFC off weeks. But whenever we do get those, I figure it's a good time to kind of pick a fun topic, a fun top 5 topic, if you will. Go back in the MMA timeline, and to do that, I need to bring on a co-host. So it's not just any co-host I tend to bring on these. They have to know, the sport, the history, or in this case, knowing the mechanics and the arts themselves don't hurt as well. So I got Marcelo Garcia, jiu-jitsu, brown belt, Benjamin Kohn. You probably know him on the artist formerly known as Twitter, as I have for his name tag here, at BJJ Oversimplified. Drop the E and the first 2 I's, and then you got it. At BJJ Oversimplified. Ben, what's up?
Thank you. Very, very happy to be back here. Last time we were talking about something a little bit different, although it did involve, taking the back a little bit. So that was so a nice tangential relation there. I'm really, really looking forward to this. Always love talking to you. It's fun to listen to and read your breakdowns. I always love watching when you post about people's success and or failures against UFC Southpaws. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Too kind. Yeah, we've hashtag Musasi for later. We've had Ben on before. I mean to have him back on, just like a lot of guests, whether it's first time or repeat. I'm really bad at it. Like, even for like breakdown shows. For like pay-per-views, I'm trying to get more guests on, but again, I don't do enough of these top 5 shows, so I'm gonna blame it on that, because I definitely would love any excuse to talk to you, or your I don't know how to say this, but your non-blood related child that you may have in the roaming around, marauding in the background there, Matt Gioia. But I got love for you guys.
SmackDown v Raw 2008. He is making good use of it right now.
Good. Yeah, you got to keep the kids busy, right? You got to keep them occupied, Just point them in a direction, buy yourself some time. Is that what you do with Gioia?
We're just trying to distract him, make sure that nothing breaks, whether it's something in our place or himself.
Well, hopefully we can do a good job of distracting the listeners or the viewers. I'm going to have an edited version of this up on YouTube. Hello there, YouTube channel. If you want to subscribe to that for all this content for free, it's Dan Tom MMA. There is a membership tier, but I'm just weird about being and bad about being a salesman. But yeah, there's stuff there if you want to support. And we also got the Substack, of course, where this will be up as well. Hello to the supporters there. Very much appreciate you guys. Again, another place you can subscribe to for free for all the usual content and then some. That's Dan Tom MMA on Substack. As you see on my name tag here, at Dan Tom MMA, where you can find me on the artist formerly known as Twitter. Now with all the formalities out of the way, let's get to the fun stuff. Why we are here, what you see in the title card. It is top 5 rear naked choke artists in MMA. So me and Ben were deciding, like, do we do top 5 back takers? Do we do top 5, RNC finishes, like citing a particular finish, which we still can do, and that can still be like its own episode, which is the fun part of these. We can dissect it. But I feel like this is one where, again, it still leaves meat on the bone for other RNC related topics. But it's a nice general one, right? So, if you really like somebody for their back taking, perhaps that might take up more of your percentage pie for the reason you're picking them, right? Or maybe it's their finishing technique, versatility, or just the one way they keep doing it and setting it up. There's plenty of justifications I'm sure we'll get to, right, Ben? But what was your inspiration for this topic? Obviously, you have you fought. Not just the jiu-jitsu rank, but you were very passionate, obviously, in these arts. So what was your take on this topic?
So I really ended up gravitating a lot towards what I felt were there was a combination of criteria, obviously, that I'm going to use, but I think that to really get me very excited, I want to feel like I'm going to watch when I'm watching someone take the back, right? The thing I really want to see are rear naked choke finishes. I want to see a guy choke the living shit out of somebody. And what separates great back takers from great finishers are those finishes, obviously, and meaning that the excitement level of watching someone take the back, who, for most of the time you can expect them to kind of just ride out the round. There's not going to be much suspense in what's going on, as opposed to someone who's really going to try and advance the position to finish you. I think there's a palpable difference in how you watch those fights. I think it's also a little bit more interesting to me to figure out like the rear naked chokers themselves, the finishers in that regard, because it makes it a little bit more that you're splitting hairs a lot of the time with so many of these guys. There's such a good list of fighters to choose from that each can have their specific arguments made in their favor to put them in that list for different reasons. They excel or focus on different things from the back that make them so unique and dangerous. And I think that it differs a lot from like a puncher debate, where it's like, how hard does the guy hit? Okay, like here's the list of the guys who knock everybody out, basically, and then you pick the ones that kind of make the most sense. This one feels like there's a lot more nuance and reasons why you could choose between a list of like 10, 12, 13 people. What's your take on it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, you could be like, and again, as with these lists, folks, like we're gonna get to we're gonna do our top 5, go to 5 to 1, work our way down, and then we'll get to listener lists, which you're always welcome to submit at the PYM podcast, Protect Your Neck podcast. Again, you find that on all social platforms, but artists formerly known as Twitter was we're mainly going to be drawn from today. But yeah, you can be as cheeky as you want, right? Like, technically, but it could be like a jiu-jitsu ace who maybe only competed in MMA for a couple fights, but technically that's eligible, right? You can get as cheeky as you want with these lists. I'm not saying I did or Ben did, we'll see, but once you even get down to the nitty-gritty of it, of just like, okay, just fighters, people you like, this and that, even then, it's, to Ben's point, it's still a big list, and you're really having to split hairs to decide between the two. And even once you get your grouping, we kind of both hinted to having some difficulties ranking where do they end up, and in that process, Ben, some fighters ended up off the list because I would be like, well, wait, how can I put him on here when this person did this, or this person was finished by this person in a head-to-head? We don't have very many head-to-heads on this list, and that's got to count for something, which I don't want to spoil anything, right? But we'll talk to those as they come up. But did you have that kind of similar battle with your shuffling too?
Yes. There's actually a specific like 4 or 5 names that after I guess we get further into the list, we might talk about like why, like maybe you'll say the name on your list and I'll be like, okay, so here's why I left them off. It's such an interesting topic, and I wouldn't say I got cheeky with any of mine. More so, I think I'll explain like the reasoning for why I put them where they put them, and hopefully there's some thematic elements that make it more interesting.
Yeah, sure. And I've got I definitely went super hipster with mine. I will tease and say that much, right? Which doesn't give it away super much. You all expect some hipster stuff with me at least, right? Maybe in the number 5 spot at least, which is the traditional hipster spot. Not saying it has to be. I'm certainly extending that welcome with my list, as we'll get to. But yeah, like thankfully for MMA Junkie, when I do the written form of this, they kind of want a little more if I can. So they'll probably encourage a top 10, which I will encourage as well, because I'm like, okay, I have a little bit of breathing room. And for that list, you're going to see the order a little bit different than I have it here, folks, because even though I put the caveat that it is my list, and I do embrace that, for something like that, I will probably have it just shuffle just a little bit out of respect for certain names that probably should be there. Either way, I think all these names are going to get love or mention in some shape or form. So everybody knows the rear naked choke. The topic is top rear naked choke artists in MMA. So this is not a UFC centric one. This spans the whole MMA top timeline. You can go to early J MMA. You can go Pride. You can go Strike Force people. Whatever you like. It could get a little wacky here. So, Ben, you've done this before, and folks, I kind of just laid out the format already. We're going to go from 5 to 1. There probably will be crossover on a list like this, because we'll probably have some same names, just not in the same places. So we'll Chinese fire drill it as best we can and kind of shuffle around. But yeah, Ben, why don't you kick it off? I'll give you the guess the steering wheel. What ended up being your number 5?
So I have to cheat slightly.
Yeah,
I did a 5 and 5A.
let's go. Let's go.
Just because I feel like they kind of match each other really well, and at different kind of with different divisions. So I felt like it was good to mix those two. And just to be very clear, if we say anything where it's like a lack of athleticism or speed or something like that, keep in mind we're always saying this in the context of professional fighters at the highest level of the sport. So
yeah.
Let's always keep that in mind, that we're comparing them to the elite of the elite of the top of the sport. So the two that I'm picking are Gerald Meerschaert and Renato Moicano, and I think they kind of mirror each other in certain ways, or at least for the same certain points I'm trying to make. A couple things just really quick. Like
nice.
Gerald Meerschaert just dropped an instructional, I believe, on BJJ Fanatics on just choking people. So it's on my watch list for this weekend already. So looking forward to that. We'll definitely be writing a miniature review, I guess. But yeah, definitely would recommend that. And also on Gerald Meerschaert specifically and his finishing mechanics, Open No Grapple on Twitter wrote a great breakdown.
Nice.
Great gifs and everything. So just definitely watch those. So all of these fighters, we're talking about the top 5 rear naked chokers we're going to pick. They're all going to exhibit excellent hand fighting, great back control, great use of following through during scrambles, with sticking with the hips, staying really tight, having good finishing mechanics. They're all going to have that by and large. So we're really splitting hairs a lot of the time. So what I wanted to focus on is with Gerald is particularly the way he hand fights is really, really nice. And also, when he's hand fighting, he's not necessarily using his hands only. Something that Open No Grapple pointed out really that he does really effectively is he pushes you around, forcing you to post, and will use those opportunities to advance position with the chokes. And I also really love the way he drapes himself over his opponent's backs, forcing them to not only carry their weight, but allows them to stay much stickier and tighter to them with a lot less effort. And again, Gerald is not the fastest or most explosive guy, so he's not looking to have these high velocity scrambles necessarily. He wants things to be slower, and the more of his weight he can drop down on you, that's going to slow things down. So I think he's a really, really good example of how someone who's not necessarily the most physically gifted fighter can develop a really, really strong, effective game using proper technique and weight distribution. So I think he's an excellent example of that. And the reason why I connect him to Moicano is because we kind of see him as someone who is, in a way, similar to Gerald, where he's not necessarily the most explosive or fastest guy. A little bit of durability issues as well that we've seen here and there pop up. But he's just so effective when he takes the back at getting to the finish line. The thing that separates things like Gerald and Renato Moicano from and shows them to be elite is that even though they aren't that physically gifted, they're still so technically sharp that if you leave even the slightest opening, they take advantage of it, and you're not getting away from it. You're just not going to get away with posting your hands and not fighting the hand not fighting the hands at all, like Riddell did. Hadzovic, if you're lackadaisical in your hand fighting, because he was fighting the hands, but Renato Moicano just blew right through it. You see that technical errors get punished so effectively and so immediately by guys who are really, really good at this. And if there's a significant skill discrepancy and you're not miming your P's and Q's, you're going to get submitted. So I think that they're like a really good introduction of like, this is how effective, strong technical work from the back and on the finishing mechanics of the rear naked choke will get you. So that's why they're my 5A connective tissue thing.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think GM3 has some deceptive backtaking ability. I will say Moicano's backtaking ability is what jumps out to me, and I'm glad you painted the picture for how well he makes hay with it once he gets there, because that is obviously not just a part of it. That's what separates the. That's like not to put a golf analogy, but that's like they say putting is where you cash your paychecks, essentially, right? That's where the money comes in. Anybody can drive it to the green, so to speak, but there's an art there, and the same thing. It's like you can get to the back, sure, but can you close the show? Otherwise, it's an arguable waste, especially in short round, single round scoring fighting. You're really gambling your energy and stuff there. So that is insanely important to have the fundamentals of those finishing abilities. I like how you tied them in that way, because both guys I look at as also deceptive back takers as well, for what it's worth. Especially GM3 with his lack of speed. And I mean that in a loving way, because I love GM3. Great shout.
Dude,
go ahead.
He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Just really quick, that's also part of the reason that we see them kind of. It becomes a problem as they face certain types of fighters, guys who could just kind of athletically blow them away a bit, or are good enough and more athletic to defend really well with the hand fighting and stuff. And we see the limitations of you're lacking in a certain way where it detracts from that.
Absolutely. So that was a good one. I'm going to go to my number 5, which is a hipster, and I want to do a 5A and 5B. I'm not going to, but I want to. I was tempted to, man. I was really torn between this old school JMMA shout that I know Capoza would be happy with, if that's a spoiler. But I didn't go that route. I actually went with Brian Caraway. And I was surprised to see him on someone's list, which we'll get to on listener list. I thought this might be one where I thought I was going to for sure go number 5 classic Dan Tom hipster spot, but someone else was just as hipster as me, so we'll shout them in due time. But I got to give shouts to Brian Caraway. I know this is a name where newer fans. I don't know why you'd be listening to this podcast, but I'm glad you are. I just feel like that's I feel like my demo is more like old school weirdos, but welcome one, welcome all. But if you don't recognize his name and the ones that do, that might be surprising, because this guy always kind of had a negative rap. The just coast in the corner, and it really doesn't matter what you do. If you're like the boyfriend of an attractive, popular female WMA fighter, like you're just going to be cast in a weird. You're going to be put in a weird spot regardless. Doesn't matter who you are. And but when you actually cut through that noise, the guy was a very deceptively experienced MMA fighter who, fought close to the NHB type days, deceptively, if you look at his resume. And, came from a lot of, hybrid wrestling, catch wrestling style, jiu-jitsu, or like under the Robert Follis Team Quest, kind of run off there, and that presence in that area ended up following Robert Follis as well. Misha did, right? For Misha's title run, they came down here to Las Vegas for Extreme Couture. And perhaps there's some bias in this pick, because in our grappling team practices, Brian was always really gracious with his time. Was just a real salt of the earth kind of dude as far as all my interactions with him, and my interactions I saw him with people that were just no name, no bodies like myself, just giving his time of day, no ego, like legitimately helping people. And the guy, what I learned was like, because again, and Ben, you know this, not everybody who's a great fighter, or so to speak, doesn't mean they're a great teacher, right? So, and a lot of the good teachers maybe aren't the best competitors, right? It's not always true, but it's more true than people would realize, I would say, right?
Yes.
And so when you have a fighter who's actually like a really good teacher and really good explaining, and it's kind of rare. And what it also did, that ability to communicate also allows you to see how actually intelligent this guy is with a lot of his game, guard passing stuff and whatnot. And I just remember him having some real entertaining RNC finishes, like the Eric Goyito Perez fight in the UFC. And by the way, Brian Caraway, he actually has 9 out of 17 of his submission wins throughout his career were rear naked chokes. So, we're roughly only talking about half there, but that's like 17 submission wins over your MMA career is impressive, no matter the context, right? And this guy fought in Strikeforce UFC. He actually had 10 if you count the one submission of all his wins on Tough. He got a a rear naked choke on the show. I forget against who, but against a UFC fighter. But it was an exhibition, so it didn't count. So he could be,
Brimage.
10 Brimage. There we go. So he could be a 10 out of 18. So over the 500 point of that record. I think only 3 or 4 in the UFC or something like that. But even if you just look at those UFC ones, you'll see that, again, you'll see a really experienced grappler who not just finding it in the scrambles and doing a lot of stuff against the cage, perhaps not committing to the cross wrist ride like a Khabib would as much, but a very similar process against the cage as far as draping your back over and when it was time to sell out and really get that second, if not hook in, to really just block that wedge so the fighter can't cheese grate you off the cage, getting that second hook side, at least getting the thigh into block, which you see a lot of clever guys do. They'll block that in. Boy, I'm thinking of an awesome finish right now, actually. And it's probably not on this list, but if we were doing top 5 finishes, I remember a guy, blocking somebody doing a tripod against the fence. And he does one of my favorite finishes, Ben, where it's like the people not realizing that you just need the one hook to finish, right? I mean, you don't need a hook at all if we were talking about certain guys, but and they did that where they just, they didn't care about the second hook so much as just blocking between their butt and their thigh between the fence, and then they clamped right there, and it was good. But yeah, Caraway he does all that cage play out in the open, out in the open scrambles. He can find his way there. We'll talk about it more with another fighter that's definitely going to get mentioned, but even if he had a half guard or especially if he had any light of day to a 3/4, he was pushing to the back, especially with the divisions he was competing in. One pass, one opening, the fighter below you is going to scramble, right? And in that scramble, he would allow the floats and get the back. And when it came to finishing, it was awesome. And there was a lot of, I think, not to timestamp this, but we're not too far off of UFC 303, where it feels like every other card, and I know it's much simpler than said, but Ben, feel free to weigh in here. I feel like we're hearing like, oh, if the guy only just went Gable grip, he just went Gable grip finish, right? And I know it's easier said than done and whatnot, and there's a lot of context to why fighters may or may not, and I'm not auditing that. But I feel like we've been hearing it a lot lately, and what was awesome about going back to watch Caraway is like, not only is he hitting that at the UFC, but he's hitting all the variations. He's hitting the palm to palm, and he's even hitting like S grip, and really getting that forearm flexion at the back of the shoulder to really. And you see how guys finish. I mean, not that you can't finish with the squeeze, right? But what I love, Ben, whether it's the, any kind of Gable, short arm, Dan Severn choke, however you want to call it, or just, your classic RNC, is when you really see this motion, right? When you see the choking arm kind of really cutting in. Like, that's when you know someone knows the leverage. They know leverage really well. They know they just need that little bit of bite over here, and they know how to use the back flexion, the lower back flexion, to get that really and to just cut across. Not that you can't do this and crush. There's obviously plenty of context for it. But there's something about that really tickles my I don't know what, but when I see that move, when I see it go, I'm like, oh yeah! I start like, am I alone there, Ben? You know what I'm talking about?
No, you're far from alone there. I think that's the moment where I jump out of my seat and go, oh, the tap's coming.
Yes, yeah. And yeah, Caraway was really, really versatile with that. And another guy that was on the short end of even some splits and stuff, maybe could have had more wins / more submissions. Like even that, he had a real competitive fight with who's now at Extreme Couture, oddly enough, Cody Stamen, where I think like 2 of those rounds ended with like locked in subs or something like that, and he and he lost the split, of course, because jiu-jitsu and criteria is not, especially like this was like before that trend we moved toward this fight. But yeah, I just wanted to get. I feel like that was definitely my hipster spot there.
Yeah, no, it's a totally fair hipster spot at pick. I saw him on lists of, he's on the list of like most rear naked choke submissions that you'll find in MMA among MMA fighters. And I saw a couple of the tweets mentioned him. Shout out, by the way, to the people who responded. Like there were some great responses across the board. Great lists, great shouts. A lot of overlap between them too. So there was a lot of uniformity, but there was always some surprising ones, and Carey being one of them. So he's definitely not someone who would stand out in any way, like in people's minds, until you start looking into this topic
Yeah,
at all.
yeah, yeah, right, yeah.
He's not going to be ever the first person that pops up. He's not a current fighter. He's also not he's not the most memorable fighter just because of the way his career panned out and just in general. So unless you look into it, you're not really going to be able to appreciate the level of skill that he brought in that area particularly. So I also really liked you bringing up the way he would get the wedge in, because that's something that's always really, really nice to see, and it's also a sign of like a high level of craft, making sure that you're not like, even if you don't have the hook in, you could still put a wedge by the hip and stuff like that, just to like anchor it in and try to advance from there.
Yeah, yeah. The little tings. Yeah. All right. So, what kind of things did your number 4 did so good that earned the number 4?
Okay, so I think the only thing that people would be maybe upset about is the placement of this one, which is BJ Penn.
All right.
Again, it's more like the different reasons for why I'm moving them around numbers wise. Like, there can be an argument for him being number 1. The guy was incredible, obviously, excellent grappler in so many different ways. The legends of him, 3 years of training, wins world championships. Like, there's a reason why his jiu-jitsu was so vaunted. Even past his prime, we saw him, and again, this is also probably past it somewhat, John Fitch, but like, the way he was able to control his back for that extended period of time, as you could see him slowly and surely running out of gas, was really impressive. And I would say if he was like still with the Marinovich brothers, like that level of cardio, I mean, why wouldn't I pick him to win that fight?
Yeah.
So the fights that I would definitely want to like isolate, because I'm going to try and isolate the different things that I really liked in these performances that you would see him do. So the first one is with Kenny Florian. The finish was really funny, in a very peculiar finish where he's using those. They're like, oh, it's those old Hickson Gracie heel kicks to the gut.
Oh yeah.
Florian let go of his 2-on-1, and he's just got like the one hand floating on the choking arm, and it's not even that. It doesn't even look at like he's holding it that tight. He's like, shit, that hurts way more than I would think it does, and instantly just locks it in. That level of creativity, like the ability to, what makes BJ Penn unique is his unique flexibility and his incredible durability and his seeming incomparable level to have just a burst of violence that's so effective. It just ends the fight so immediately, where like you literally have at points in his career where it's like, okay, he's not getting tired. Now what? Like it's gonna happen eventually. It was the feeling that you had. So we know he has that ability, and it makes that skill so much more exciting and unique and incredible to watch. And that's why like seeing something that creative to open up the opportunity for a finish is awesome. The fight with Pulver, the second one, obviously, the one that ended in the rear naked choke. What I really liked is that this was probably one of the better examples of him, the way he's able to stabilize and float between like mount and back take, and his flexibility really helps with that. But he does such a really good job of floating with the positions and moving with your hips and staying with it. The other thing I liked is that he was using the posts that he was stripping to help stabilize. So like he would put his hands over the mat to like help him push himself back over him. But when he was stripping posts, he was using the pressure from that to also, I guess, adjust is the word I would use, the positioning of his body too. So he created his own post while stripping Pulver's post, and it's such a unique thing that
Makhachev.
Yes,
Makhachev does it early, by the way. So again, another thing, by the way, before everybody started jerking off over Khabib and Makhachev, BJ Penn was doing cross wrist rides to back takes against Fitch, like Ben pointed out. You know, he's doing the post disruption / balancing. He's doing the leg wrap. He did all these things like decades before these guys did.
Triangles and legs, and it's just like, and they even pointed at this is when commentary was still doing homework, because they're like, BJ Penn does this all the time. Like he always, as soon as he gets in, he's looking for that. It's the funniest thing, because when they still gave a shit, except for the couple of people who still do.
And not to interrupt you, but because I have him as my spoiler alert, I actually had him as my number 2 for a second, but I ended up putting him as my number 1 because this motherfucker has head-to-heads with people on the list, at the risk of burning a name, because we're gonna burn a couple here anyways. But you mentioned Florian. who hold on that name, right? But that's at least on the honorable mentions list for everybody, at the very least, right? He's a presence here at the very least. And guys like Kao Uno, which, by the way, Kao Uno didn't fall for that in their second fight. That was a draw, which BJ probably still should have won. He had his back, and he was doing the heel kick thing as well. But Kao Uno, who we'll talk about, that guy's a master at this move as well. But he didn't, and we're gonna parlay in a Kenny Florian, who's my number 4 here, actually. By the way, so this will actually be smooth. And we're not done talking about BJ yet, so if I interrupted any notes, Ben, please fire back here. But no, that's where we're going with this. But the reason why, I'm guessing why, Ben, you can say that you totally nod right away, like this could be anywhere on your list, as high as number 1, because he, again, like, you're like, Kao Uno who, or Kenny Florian, the commentator, like, these are legit guys, both in different ways, much better than given credit for. Very underrated lightweights in their own ways, by the way, Kao Uno and Kenny Florian. Different types of guys, slight crossover in era, slightly, but obviously Kao Uno before Kenny, and Kenny's still an old school guy in his own right. And what he was able to do to Kenny was ridiculous. Like, it's easy to understate, kind of explaining it, the greatness of BJ. And this is the best BJ's ever been, by the way. I think it's Kenny Florian fight and the Diego Sanchez fight to follow it, right? So poor Kenny, he has to, his title shots come off to like juiced up Sean Shirk in the era where like all you have to do is lay on people to get wins, right? In mid-aughts UFC era. Then he faces literal goats in their primes, Obviously, Aldo has the craziest post-prime that's better than anybody's prime. But you know what I mean? He faces prime Aldo and prime Penn. Like, you can't overlook, like people are like, oh, he didn't win a belt, or he's the best. Like, you really got to look at that. Like, this guy really fought really good people. And in that fight, it looks like a nature channel, like a snake devouring prey. Like, even before that, right? Before the Gracie, the Hickson Gracie kicks from the commentary call, right? You get an amazing half guard where he's using just that forearm pressure, right, to really just jerk. He's like just doing short forearms, like like it's a dirty jiu-jitsu match, right? Like really just making Kenny uncomfortable, and was able to just as we'll talk about with another guy. You see that progress once you get to half guard, you get to mount, and for BJ it was more his ability to get to mount, whether it was the half guard way against Kenny Florian, classic MMA, whether it was the leg wrap, before Khabib was doing it, the wrestle-centric way, or just the crazy flexible jiu-jitsu way that he hits on Renzo. Remember Renzo Gracie at middleweight, that mount. So for BJ, it was more just getting to the mount, like it was a wash, repeat, rinse cycle, and. Even when you're in his guard, right? Like, here's the ironic part. Like, one of his best back takes leads to his first stoppage losses. The octopus guard back take against Matt Hughes, the second fight. You know what I'm talking about, Ben?
I don't. The second fight, I do not recall that one.
So he's in full guard and he's getting ground and pounded by Matt, and he just and Matt reaches up with his left side to do a big ground and pound, and BJ's in full guard, but he ducks under the armpit, right, and swims the arm back to the back, right, octopus style, and then kind of comes up in this athletic, like it's insane. It's one of the only like BJ Penn things that he was like vaunted for doing, but because he was BJ Penn, he didn't train hard, and in his defense, that was like a short notice fight because he was supposed to fight GSP that night. Hughes was, and BJ stepped in with the champ his back because he never technically lost the title, which from the first time he got it, which was via RNC, right? Yes. But he pops his rib out in that, and then he's just done, right? And he gets crucifix TKO by Matt Hughes. So that was kind of the ironic part. One of his coolest back takes led to his demise as far as his first stoppage loss. But B, it's just a fun tally I have on a lot of these lists. I look at like, for example, right? Like, I think this is probably fair to burn this name, but Rose Namajunas, right? She's a fighter who is undefeated anytime she gets to someone's back. This is one of those weird stats, right? That pops out, right? And BJ Penn would have this record in place. And we can look at that for a lot of these fighters. Brian Caraway didn't qualify for it. I don't think GM3's qualified for it, or Morcano, because I've seen them get to the backs in fights and still end up losing, right? Yeah. BJ's never lost in a fight that he's got to opponent's back, except for that Hughes fight, or the second Hughes fight, right? But as far as his rear naked chokes, just some stats to fire off, and I'll let you finish off the BJ part. But So he only has 6 career RNCs, but he only has 6 career finishes. They're all rear naked chokes. They're all in the UFC and against high level opposition too, as higher level opposition.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's a strong hit rate. I mean the Lion Killer, he reserved it for the Lions. It showed how, to your point, setting this up of why you love this move, right, Ben? He kind of proves why it's so powerful.
It's funny because Florian was so close. Like he was one of those guys who I was like, okay, and where, and it was obviously difficult because I put BJ Penn at 4, I'm not going to put Florian ahead of BJ Penn.
Right.
So
yeah. Sure.
I'm trying to figure out, do I keep him on here? Do I move BJ Penn up? So it was a bit of a. There was a while there where I was really considering putting Florian on the list, and he's excellent. He's an excellent addition to the list. So It's one of those. This is like the perfect example of how much we're splitting hairs on these guys, though, right? Like
right, yeah.
Kenny Florian is that good, and like you said, all 6 finishes in the UFC at pretty much the highest level at the time that you can get a championship / mere championship level, and that's part of the reason why I valued what BJ Penn did so much in that fight, is because the fact that he's doing this as someone who is so good at the exact same thing that you're doing to him, and to catch him like that was so impressive, and that's the reason why he just didn't make it onto my list. The one thing I did forget to do, but then you said, you're pretty much spoiled that he's going to be on yours at some point, so I will not add anything, and if you don't bring it up, then I'll shove it in there. It's the last thing, but I'm
okay.
I'm pretty good.
In that case, I'll jump right to Kenny Florian, and we can dive in on that. So what Kenny Florian did beat BJ Penn in, however, is he got more rear naked chokes than BJ Penn. In fact, Kenny Florian, up until a fighter, a Brazilian fighter who we'll talk about who competed in divisions north of these guys, so they never got a chance to meet, obviously. But Kenny Florian was the long-time wins leader, and despite being out forever, he's still holding on, I believe, to the number 2 spot with I want to say 7, or is it 7 or 6?
Let me check. I have him open.
He has 8 submission wins total his whole career, and 7 of them are by RNC. Kimura comes in the regional scene, so I know that one's not a UFC one. It was one of his few regional fights. But again, kind of like BJ 6 for 6, Kenny 7 for 8, right? Another higher hit percentage. I mean, this was Kenny's move, right? I mean, when you think of Kenny Florian, I finish fights, you think about this move because, even though Kenny wasn't like a knockout puncher or anything like that, he was slicing, dicing guys up, but the fight would funnel to a scramble, or once he got to a back, he would close the show, and he really prided himself. The way Ben was talking, I mean, hearing him and his brother Keith just in the lab and really just focusing on the strengths as far as the finishing aspects, not wasting. The back was a real big thing for Kenny, like if he was there, you're finishing the fight, otherwise you fail. Like he was real big on that, and I think his style, he practiced what he preached, as far as that for the most part. I think too, I didn't go back with quite the fine comb, but off memory, I think he is a guy too who, whenever he got to the back position, he didn't lose. Because again, he spent most of the time on bottom in negative positions against Gray Maynard or Sean Shirks and fights like that. I don't remember him ever getting to those guys, the wrestlers' backs, the superior wrestlers. He always had kind of trouble with there. But as far as getting to the back, finding it, and then just really finishing there, using his razor blade like long arms, sliding in for those clean finishes. Are always kind of burnt into my head, and this is a biased one. He was one of my first favorite fighters, so watching him get a lot of these early RNC finishes were like some of my first introductions as far as like modern era, or close to the modern era, closer to it, when I got into it. Anyways, jump in. What do you got for Kenny Florian here, Ben? I want to hear what you got for this one.
I guess there's always going to be. With Kenny, again, he excels at all the same things that we're talking about in general, and again, he would probably fall into a more GM3 lack of physical ability, just holding him back in certain situations.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, a guy who's more physically gifted is going to have the advantage, and if they're good enough to defend against you, or they're better than you there, they're going to be able to stop you. I'm actually going to use the Jose Aldo, and I guess this is something that we'll see with one of my further long picks also, and I think with a fair amount of these fighters too. His fight with Jose Aldo, I think, is just really, really a good representation of, like, while he was able to control Aldo a lot against the fence, he just wasn't able to ever get to the position he needed to, which is the back, right? If you're going to work to get someone to the ground, try to take their back, and you can't because you can't even get them down, and you can't get to their back, it's really rough. So I'm not. I didn't go back and watch his fights enough to point any specifics either. And it's definitely one of those things. Basically, this list just became the whole honorable mentions list. Is basically just became a list of fights that I'm gonna watch.
Yeah.
I think I watched maybe like 15 different fights among the fighters that I picked, and the ones that was really strongly like the final couple to kind of go between.
Same.
But so I really do want to go back and revisit it, because I know that Kenne was one of those guys who is that good, and he did finish his peers, the guys at the top of the lightweight division at the time, like Stevenson. His finish of Guida, I do remember watching that relatively recently, and I remember going like, that was a really nasty finish.
Yes, that's the one. That was the one that sticks out. Yes, I love that one. Yeah,
I remember that being a really fun fight. Like, those are two guys who are going to produce that kind of finish, where you have a Clay Guida who is at the time, and particularly, like, reckless with his own physical well-being. So it was going to the discrepancy in that submission grappling, particularly to Clay's sometimes lackadaisical submission defense, was the right recipe to put out that finish.
Watch that one and then the Gomi one back to back, and it's like prime operating Kenny Flory, and you just see the heat-seeking ability again. It was very on brand. The I finish fights. I mean, he really was just. You could really tell that's what he was. Again, not wasting these opportunities. It's hard to kind of oversimplify it, pardon the pun there, but really, it really is. With it just, he sees, he kills, he takes the opportunity, and not being the most athletic guy, a guy who had to kind of learn on the fly, as far as like building the UFC, that's very difficult as well. So, and real quick before I get torched, I lied. BJ Penn actually lost a second fight that he got someone's back in. If you want to count what he did to Nick Diaz in round 1, remember that?
Oh wow,
it's pretty impressive. He got his ass beat, but he actually it's both a fun round 1, and I think people forget that he wins. He actually wins round 1, I believe, too, which is you forget with how bad he got beat in the later rounds. But
well, that's the thing. He gassed out and then he died.
Exactly. But the fact, I mean, how many people did you see take Nick Diaz's? I know he was a guy that gave Turtle a bunch too, but how many people ever like took his back?
I remember. Did Diego Sanchez? I don't know if Diego Sanchez ever took his back necessarily,
almost, but they were. Yeah.
They kept going through the scramble. There was a lot of scrambling. I remember that fight was a wild one.
Absolutely. Yeah, because Nick Diaz was a Turtle guy too, which is crazy. Like he should have more. I should have more visions and flashbacks right now of people on Nick Diaz's back, considering the amount of times, even just from full guard, he would just turtle up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and obviously you face guys like GSP who are going to maybe go for positional ground and pound over the back take. Obviously, there's that context, but still, it's pretty impressive. He didn't get his back taken more, that guy.
He knew he was going to.
All right, number 3, Ben. We're on you. What's your number 3, sir?
Uriah Faber.
Woohoo! Nice. No crossover. I'm just excited that you mentioned him.
I like you see him like again, like when you're the first thing I did when I'm sure Dan did the same thing is the first thing I did was most submissions by rear naked choke, looking for just the raw numbers so that you can kind of at least build a list to start from. And Faber popped up. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'd forgotten about that, and I have this like the thing that popped in my head. I'm like, he's got a lot of rear naked chokes, and the only reason that I guess we don't know him for his rear naked chokes is because his guillotines are so good, right? Like he's the guillotine at the team alpha male guillotine, the thing that everyone just has that's really, really effective there. So like he's so good at another choke that you forget that he's so good at this choke too. I think that's really, really good, and it kind of like makes sense. Like if you're going to have that level of squeeze, you're probably going to have it from behind too, right?
Yes, yeah.
So what I like about this is that we were kind of talking about like earlier. There's some guys who they get the back, and there's not as much of a danger or a finishing ability. when they get there necessarily, at least against, a lot of guys. And I think with Faber, man, like, not only is he really, really good at finishing the choke, but my God, his back takes are insane.
Yes.
This is where I would call Gioia, but he's watching in the room, so if he wants to come, Gioia. The fights that I would point out, like for the first one I watched, I'm like, oh, Rafael Sunset, I got to rewatch that one.
Oh yeah.
And I watch it, and I'm like, we went from the full guard to Rafael Sunset tapping out in like 6 seconds. What the fuck? That is insane level of like just the scrambling, the ability to scramble like that, take the back so cleanly, and finish the choke that quickly. Like, you see a Sunset, like, he's not like fighting the hands, but he's like, he basically, as he takes his back, he starts to squeeze so hard that he pulls him off balance onto his back. And then by the time he starts even looking to defend the hands, like, earnestly, you just see it's done already. The other fight is we're talking about the Uriah Faber back take, so you talk in 2 seconds. The second one's the Menjivar one.
Yes, good.
The way he went from like parallel across his shoulders, like he's carrying him like a cross, like Timo Leopoldo carrying the cross, to the hooks, getting the far side of in.
That's so sick.
He starts, instead of dealing with the hand fight, starts pulling the face up of Menjivar to open the neck up, and then just shoots that hand under. The squeeze, you see Menjivar's head looks like it's about to pop. Now, I'm going to let Gioia really quickly speak about the Faber fight.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Leo Santos Stan here.
Yeah.
Here to talk about some grappling. Uriah Faber was a tremendous back taker. I know we talk a lot about when it comes to him, his wrestling, his overhand right, his legacy with Team Alpha Male, but I think he gets lost in the shuffle how good of a scrambler he was, not only when it comes to fending off takedowns, extending takedowns, but it comes to taking the back, right? You have a guy here who's taking a guy in Rafael Assunção who's beating TJ Dillashaw, right? Who, on the record,
he got the W on the record.
Right, was competitive against. It was a staple of the top 10, top 5 of the division for 8 years, and Uriah Faber's coming out of here in less than 6 seconds and switching to a back take. I think one of the things you really have to look for when it comes to back taking specialists, especially with the rear naked choke, is our ability to get it from multiple places, right? And you see with Uriah Faber going from not only standing positions, coming up from guards, wrestling up singles. It's currently one of the current metas in no-gi jiu-jitsu, right? So a lot of wrestlers are coming in, specifically a guy like Jay Rodriguez coming in with duck unders, right? And being able to go and attack the back from multiple angles. So when you have a wrestler like Uriah Faber who's able to get to all these different angles, especially with the squeeze he's able to have, I think it really solidifies his place in the top 5 when it comes to back taking specialists and rear naked choke specialist.
This is great.
Was that professional?
No, that was great. Great job. Hit it out of the park. Hit it out of the park, Matt.
Yeah,
that's a great.
The code switch there was crazy.
There we go. I know, right? That was awesome. That was awesome. That was excellent. God, that's a goddamn good pick.
I do want to talk about Damian Maia when you guys inevitably get to him, because he will be number 1, and if he's not, you guys should be.
Who's he talking about? Is he making up names again?
Who's Damian Maia?
No, I thought we were talking about Ian Gary's leg lock. Had me on for the 5 worst submissions I've ever seen in my life. It's like 3 of our leg locks in the UFC. I'll have a list.
All right, let's do it.
Oh my god, I'm down.
That's so good. That's so good. I think Faber's it's inexcusable not to have him if we're doing a back take list. And by the way, how about that? I didn't even realize I gave you a segue there. I was talking about the most turtling fighters, Nick Diaz, and then Uriah Faber is the most turtling guy right there too. Dude's always giving. Dude, for a good back taker, that guy gives his back so much, which is like extra points, right?
Yeah, that's how he learned how to break through every single back take attempt ever. He's like, I'll give them my back so that I know exactly what to do.
Yeah, he reverse engineered the wrestler problems, right?
Yeah.
So no, that I mean it's beautiful, and I'm glad you mentioned the Menjivar is like one's burnt into my head. Mitsugaki is another good one, and the Sunsao one. I don't know, man. Like I know Sunsao didn't have the name even amongst maybe hardcores as much, but like even us hardcores knew that was a quality first drop down to bantamweight. Fight, and then to win like that over a guy like a Sunsao in that way was super impressive with that back take. Yeah, man, favorite. Wow, it's a good parallel for my number 3, which we'll get to in a second. But I'm almost kicking myself for not putting them on here. But like you could honestly say that about like 5 fighters here, which we'll get to as well. That are going to be the same thing. Like I'm just. Especially just hearing you guys make such a good case, like you're absolutely right. He's a great representation too of the lighter weight fighters as well. How they can excel in this spot, and shoot, man, you guys nailed that. I don't really have too much to add there. That was awesome. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I think makes it even more impressive is right. Just like you said, it's the lighter weight classes, right? At the heavyweight classes, even 55 up, you're not going to necessarily not everyone's going to have such a high scrambling ability after a certain point. You do really have that at 125, 135. Like those are the divisions that we'll see scrambles go on and on and on and on among unranked fighters, and just back and forth attempts at taking the backs and sweep attempts and get ups and mat returns, and that's where we'll just see all of that. So for Faber to be that proficient at taking the back so much above and beyond what we see at that level already is I think really helps shove him into the middle of the top 5.
Yeah, that parlays into my next pick, but also real quick just kind of touches on why guys like Kenny Florian were both impressive, but also making this pick impressive, because at the time when if you're like me and you're watching Kenny Florian in real time in his career, he's competing in the lightest division UFC has, right? Back when Kenny was competing, they didn't have 145 with Faber or 135. So, it's seeing him being able to kind of have that dead eye, so to speak, and be able to snipe in the scramble and grab a back and snatch up a choke was impressive. But as you get lower, and as we were exposed to the lower weight divisions thanks to WEC and that getting absorbed, we saw how much more impressive and entertaining that dynamic is as you get lower and lower down. Mm-hmm. To now, the UFC's lowest division is no longer 155. It is 125 pounds. So, Ben, I had to grab someone from this, right? And there's some guys you can grab, and this guy actually has some head-to-head wins over some other RNC specialists in the division, which counts for something. But this guy is the more... And it's great because we also get the sample that I love, because Uriah Faber brought that sample of fireworks right now on 4th of July. We're recording, folks, with my dogs bark. I apologize. I'm going to try to keep talking, and they seem out of it. Cool. But like you got the standing in the background. It'll bounce out. Yeah. But you got the standing example with Uriah Faber, right? So this guy is pretty much the lighter weight Uriah Faber, except if Uriah Faber was like really drunk and sloppy, like not literally drunk, but looked like he was drunk and was just sloppy about pretty much everything, but was able to getting to the back from different angles and positions. Alessandro Pantoja. I'm a big Pantoja mark.
I knew who it was. I knew. Like while you're describing him, I'm like, oh, he took Pantoja.
Yep. Yeah, and again, it's an active fighter at the time of this recording, not to timestamp it too hard. But even though it's a hard and fast rule where you can't pick active fighter, obviously. But Pantoja, I think, has enough of a sample size at this point to kind of earn his respect. He is 8 out of his 10 submission wins are by RNC. This is his move. He is as Jack Slack says, the back-taking brawler or something like that. I forget. He has a sweet article title of that. Shouts to Jack Slack. But essentially, whether he's dogging it out and doing shuck buys along the fence, whether it's, mid-scramble, whether it's, he's got the back and he's doing the, like with the Brandon Royval in their first fight in round 2, right? And he knocks out the butterfly, uses the butterfly and steps there, knocks out the back of the knees to drop the guy to his butt and take the back there. I mean, stuff that, like, you see dudes do to white belts when they're tired. He's doing it when he's tired to like high level fighters, and he gets a lot of crap because he's just like not the sexiest style for the kids to like, and his optics of being tired sadly take away from both his good grappling, wrestling, and striking. Like that's why a lot of rounds are controversial, or people will score it against him when he's actually winning because he just looks like he's gassed out. But the man is dogged, and whether it's on the ground or again, like with one of my favorites, who's another guy who doesn't get enough credit, Alex Perez, getting his back like the standing position, and not being pretty about it. And just cranking the neck.
Cranking the shit out of him.
Just the shit out of it. I mean, getting that leverage point, whether he's under the chin or not, he's taking it home. And that's kind of how you should be, especially in the fight game. You're hooking, you're shooting, you're going for the break, so to speak, so to speak. So if you're going to have that mentality in a tournament, you're going to have it in a fight. And if you're going to have it about joint locks in a fight, well, why wouldn't you have it for an RNC? Why wouldn't you have that same mentality to just you're taking something there? Who cares if they're going to bite into your forearm a little bit? Bite it harder. I'm going to crank your neck harder, and Pantoja just seems like one of those dudes, man. So, yeah, he's my number 3.
I really like Pantoja. I actually just saw a clip of the, I don't know if it was a reply to one of us, but the clip of him taking the back of Askarov. That was where he sits, pushes him, hits him with the one of, I think, weirdly enough, one of Mateus's favorite things to fuck with people with, where he kicks you out the back, it comes under you and kicks the back of your legs out.
Yes, yeah.
The honest to God reason I didn't want to put him on the list is because of the fact that he's there. He has gotten it. People like GM3, right? He's not always going to get the opportunity to choke you because he's not always going to get the opportunity to get to your back. But once he's there, it's probably going to end up in a finish. Pantoja, we've seen enough guys kind of like defend against him from that position where I just didn't feel like to put him on the top 5 just didn't feel good or didn't feel like the right move. We just recently saw Ursig and Royval in the second fight being able to defend against him, and we've seen him get submitted by him. So you would ostensibly feel like that opportunity should be there for Pantoja.
True.
There's just been enough instances where I felt like he just wasn't there. It feels more like he took the back. He's probably going to win the round, rather than he took the back. Oh, is the finish going to happen? It doesn't feel that way anymore, and that was why one of the reasons that I brought up in the beginning and why I made a bit of a distinction.
I think that comes with the dynamic shift in a lot of his fights too, because in championship fights he's fighting a lot differently, which we see a lot of fighters from the greats, GSP on down, by the way, do a similar thing. Mm-hmm. So it's not an unknown thing, but I do think that is a byproduct of it. Now, perhaps he's thinking more of banking rounds than the finishes. And all that's fair, but I guess last thing I'll say to defend it is the way we set up this division is that I wonder if that does speak a little more to the divisions, though, where you will see less of the 6 for 6s and the 8 for 10s, you know what I'm saying? The higher percentages once you get to these points. Obviously, not to be the stereotype, but as you get higher in weight, middleweight and above, you really start seeing the grappling disparities kind of start to come into play, where grappling specialists can really kind of soar in those divisions. But as we get lower, that dominance, it is tougher. Whereas like welterweight for a long time was considered wrestleweight because that's what you needed at the top. Whereas flyweight, everybody can wrestle and scramble. Big deal. Well, who are you trying to impress here? You know what I'm saying? So there is a little bit of that, I feel, which kind of speaks to why, again, people like us are defending, are defending the lighter weights, in our defense. But yeah, that is more than fair. Yeah, I probably would have gone with Faber. I think I like Ben's number 3 a little more, but I'm going to stick with it. And Pantoja will still probably rank highly in the top 10. Regardless, when I do the list, I mean, he'll be in the top 10 for sure. Obviously, he's in my top 5, folks. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how he ages. He's still in a position too where another reason why I don't like it, because even if I really like these fighters, why I don't like putting active fighters is because he could get more. He could add to his, right? What if he, continues to defend the title against the odds and then gets another rear naked choke to his ledger in the process, right? Against a good guy.
Yeah.
That it doesn't boost him way up, but it certainly boosts him higher. So it's hard when you have active figers, for better or worse, because their case can get better or worse, which is the kind of dangerous thing. Whereas at least you can, when you're doing an all-time wide-spanning list like this, you could feel a little safer where you settle on for a grade with a fighter with their careers done, right?
For sure, it makes it a lot easier because you know what you've got to work with, as opposed to somebody who's like if he submits the next three people by his rear naked choke, yeah, he's on the top five. Like it's one of those situations. But I understand.
But that was a tough part of this list too. We'll get to it. But honestly, literally I feel like not 80, but more like 65 to 70% of my list are fighters that are somewhat active in a way or form still, some way or form. So it was tough to avoid all of them. So I guess I took the bite there. What do you have for your number 2, Ben?
I got Charles do Bronx, Oliveira.
Nice.
It would feel off to have him off the list. A lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, specific things that we see, that we like to see when you're trying to work towards the finish in the back, he's got a bunch of those. He doesn't have the issue of a lack of athleticism. He has multiple different ways to get to the back, whether it's off of his back or where he's got when he locks you in the clinch up against the cage. He can hit it from shot takedown attempts and come up, slide up the back. He's got a bunch of different ways to do so. So you're almost guaranteed, unless someone can completely shut him down and keep him on the feet, you're almost guaranteed to get at least one situation where he takes the back of his opponent. And when he does so, it's almost like instant transmission. It's incredible to watch. He's so slick and so fluid with it. I think of everyone that I can think of, the first person I think of when I think of graceful back takes for such a large person, because when we talk about guys at 125, 135, they're generally smaller people. You'd expect them to look like they can transmit instantly to the back. But for someone he's damn near 6 feet tall, dude probably walks around 185, 190 or more. He's a solid sized dude. To move that gracefully when he takes the back is always, it's really impressive. He can the first one I want to walk through is we talked about the advancing a little bit, advancing through the defenses, kind of fighting to hands and working your way through to secure the choke. We have examples of him doing that. We have examples of him hurting somebody and then jumping on it kind of just immediately. Like I said, that instant transmission, it just takes the back and he's locking in the choke as he's taking the back. We have examples of him working his way through the scramble too, where the guy is constantly moving. He doesn't have necessarily everything cinched in just yet, but he's already advancing the choke before the position is locked in. He produces these finishes relatively consistently. He's got a bunch of rear naked chokes. I don't know if it's 9 or whatever it might be, and across his career, and he does so in a way where he hits all the notes. He, I think, more than anybody, embodies the moment where if he takes your back, your next question is, does this person survive? Not how long will it take before they get themselves off their back, or we're just riding out the round. Because Charles is probably going to go for the finish aggressively, and that usually it's that oh my god, that level of danger that fighters seem to experience when they're moving with Charles Oliveira on their back. The understanding that one mistake gets capitalized immediately, the squeeze he can generate, the way he switches his grips and hand fights throughout the attempts to lock in and secure the choke, he's number 2 to me. I understand that it kind of feels maybe like an obvious pick, but sometimes the obvious pick just feels like the right pick.
He is tied for 3rd for most rear naked choke finishes. He's tied with a 3-way tie. He's tied with your number 5, Renato Moicano, and Brendan Allen, who I think is a decent shout. Somebody gave, which we'll give credit to.
And a lot of his rear naked chokes, Brendan Allen's, were in his most recent fight. I think he's 4 in a row at one point, or 5 in a row. Yeah, exactly.
So anybody murdering me for Pantoja, not so much that Ben's bringing another active fighter, but here's the thing. I actually had these guys as I wanted to do this 1A, 1B for this spot for myself. But knowing that I was going to do a top 10, I was trying not to get greedy. I'm like, yeah, you get to do a top. You get to include. I'm going to get to include them both, and they obviously, especially do Bronx, needs to be up there, high on the list. But the funny thing is that I'm obviously a big do Bronx fan as well, so I guess I'd be damned with biased either way. But part of me was, the 8 out of 10, compared to Oliveira is 9 out of 21. But here's the interesting thing, is because Oliveira, I think he was always, I'm willing to say he was probably always good at taking the back, right? And from his early jiu-jitsu days when he was like just a lanky kid getting into this game. And he was probably also always good at the guard. You know, you see him get the guard submission on Darren Elkins when he first comes in. And people stuck with that narrative all the way up until his last fight. Like, watch out for his guard, when really it's both his back takes, which we'll talk about and is more than justified, but also his actual, you could argue from the numbers and stuff, like the highlight that I focused on was his front chokes, you know, and if we did a top 5 front choke fighters, I think Charles is deserved to be on there as well.
I think the way I would answer that is, you know how the way Faber, I said his guillotines overshadow the rear naked choke?
Yes.
I would say Charles is so proficient and so dynamic with his rear naked choke and back takes that it overshadows, in my opinion, and again, he got into some of his biggest wins too. It's like the rear naked choke on Fuji and the Gioia fight. So like to see that, I think that kind of is able to somehow be on par with his front chokes, which we see him go for all the time. So I think it's that's kind of one thing I would put there.
And I think the reason why the front chokes even became a thing, because I think that the front chokes are more a product of his MMA game. I'm willing to guess that he probably didn't have a ton of front chokes when he first came in, but putting that pressure style and seeing that it feeds right into it. Now you see it's a part of his clinch work. He goes and clinch knee collar tie and feeds into the left front choke every time. It's just like a habit for him. So that's more just speaks to his evolution as an MMA fighter. But I think the RNC has always kind of been his baby. I mean, this guy, you know, to your point, when he does get there, it's close to over, or it's like really, you know, scary, like it's life or death, like Michael Chandler before he eventually still ended up getting finished, granted by strikes, right? Barely getting out in that first round, or Arman Sarukian somehow getting out of the front. Like, these are such high percentage things for him, right? Like they're very rare. And it's like by the literal skin of your teeth if you're able to escape an attempt, if you're amongst that few on the stat, right?
It feels inevitable when he's on your back, so which also always makes the moments that people do escape from the back, like that's like oh my god, he's okay.
Yeah, and we're talking about standing RNCs, you know. Again, his are right up there with Faber's and the rest we mentioned as far as most memorable. Back when Efrain Escudero one's always burnt into my head. That one was just amazing. He just hops on. That was just a visually pleasing one. That was like where you're like you all see the prank of like the friend jumping on someone's back to mess around, like, oh, I'm gonna get you. Like, it looked like that, but in a fight. You know, the Efrain Escudero one looked like someone like a middle schooler like pranking his friend, but it was a real fight. He got him. But that's a great pick, and again, Du Bronx, for what it's worth, Ben, it may seem obvious, but it's for good reason, man. He should be up there, and again, he was going to be right up there with the number 3 range for me. So we're not too far off as far as our opinions there. All right, so number 2 time. Let's see here. Number 2. All right, we'll do my number 2 since we already know my number 1 is BJ Penn, and then we'll finish with your number 1. Sound good?
Sound good to me.
All right. It's probably going to be the same fighter, so maybe I'm guessing it's going to be the same. Maybe at this point.
I would bet a few dollars on it.
Damon Mora, right? Is that who you have? Damon Mora.
It's similar. It's similar.
Yeah, sorry, Damian Maia. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, I mispronounced. Yes, of course, folks.
I should have.
And I'll set up the volleyball, and I'll let Ben spike it down. And when I said BJ was originally my number 2, can you guess who was originally my number 1? So again, it's all the same. It all ends up being the same, folks. We can't nitpick these.
Was it Ron Waterman?
Yeah, Ron Waterman. Callback. There's a callback right there. Holy shit. But watch out.
I wouldn't want him on my back. Yeah, hide your mom's.
Hide your mom's, Ron Waterman. Damian Maia, of course. As far as, you know, we might have seen really technical on some people, light on the process of others. Like, I don't know if there's any way I could, you know, state any harder how much I love this process more than I already have. I mean, it's the game that I love. It's effective at the high levels. It's effective for the older guys for a reason. The half guard, sit up, his whole process to get to the back, kind of building off that old school Minotauro no Garrett game where he shoots the bad double and then dives to a half guard. Damian Maia would knowing that back to my number 5, Brian Caraway, if he's in half guard, he knows to push. He's got the back from there, from top half. And Damian doing the reverse engineering so deep, it's like, wait a minute, from bottom half, I got your back too. And just knowing that process and knowing that about him, just watching him suck guys into his game, was part of the drama, was part of the fun. It was almost like those old, not to glorify the old Gracie days, but those, Zulazinho, Hickson Gracie, the kind of, or Big Nog, speaking of Big Nog, right, Bob Sapp, where you got to kind of take the beat, you got to put yourself in a negative position first to get to the gold, right? Mm-hmm. And watching that as a fan. So you have that aspect that Damian brought to it more than anybody else, first of all, right? Both entertainment and technical, he's knocking out those check boxes. And once he gets to the back, even his 40-year-old old man ass can still, he can still do the body triangles and hold him there against Jorge Masvidal, who's got good and underrated submission defense, right, in that fight they had. So he can still do the young man stuff, the pretty stuff, or against the fence, the Rick Story wedge and the crank there. And again, I'm sure he was always good at the RNCs, maybe I remember watching early in, although a lot of my memories was watching Damian Maia hit triangle arm bars on heavyweights in the gi and stuff like that. But you see, like we said with Dude Bronx, their jiu-jitsu games evolve, right, to what kind of fits MMA better. And obviously you didn't see the guard stuff from Damian unless he was trying to set up his sit-ups, right? His game adjusted, but one thing that was just always tried and true was the rear naked chokes, which I believe 10 out of his 14 submission wins are RNCs. So Ben, what do you got for Damian, man?
Do you want me to do my number 1?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I thought your number 1 was Damian, but if it's not, just jump in and then go into your number 1.
No, it is Damian.
There we go.
I'm saying,
okay.
You want me to say there then? Okay. So, okay. Just full disclosure. I modeled a good amount of my game, particularly the half guard, to try and take the back off of Damian Maia, and so there's obviously that. He's my number 1. Probably arguably in general. I think that most people would probably pick him as their go-to right off the top of their head. But there's also that, I have such an appreciation for him as a fighter.
Absolutely.
We've talked about the limitations people have in some ways, physically or athletically. Damian was huge, particularly at welterweight, and I would have liked to have seen him make that move probably earlier in his career, because that would have been a little bit more interesting to see him have a bit more time. But we know he didn't. He wasn't the most explosive striker or athlete. There's something. He's so good, right? Mm-hmm. He is the quintessential jiu-jitsu fighter, the jiu-jitsuero in mixed martial arts. The guy who is he is the jiu-jitsu icon. Was he the best jiu-jitsu guy to ever walk into a UFC cage or mixed martial arts in general? He is not. He is not the most accomplished necessarily in jiu-jitsu, but he is what has come to be. He personifies it for the sport of mixed martial arts. The way he has such impeccable control and timing, and the ways he would get to your back, whether, like you said yourself, on the cage, he would use his chain wrestling to open up opportunities to take the back and backpack you while standing, which he's done to basically everybody who's not able to completely shut him down on the takedown attempts, like Tyron Woodley. We saw that fight, and there's, again, some of the limitations there physically. But the way he would pass, putting so much pressure with his tripod, and as he gets the half guard, when you're watching him work, on top, it looks like he's doing a jiu-jitsu match in a mixed martial arts fight, and it's so wonderful to watch. The ability to his weight distribution is damn near perfect, particularly when he's fresh. Obviously, when he gets a little bit tired, he can be a little bit more sloppy, like everyone can. But there are a couple of fights that really exemplify what made him so good, because again, he had all of the things that we've talked about, except for, I guess, the explosive athleticism. from a technical perspective, the way he used pressure on Condit's jaw when he was switching, he switched to hand control. So he forced Condit down to all fours so that he could switch to getting his hand. And it wasn't a choke, but it was utilizing the mechanics to create so much pressure to force Condit to move the way he wanted so he didn't have to strip the post. We've talked about Gerald Meerschaert forcing people to post in order to get to the neck. He was using the control of the neck in a way to get him to have to remove his post, essentially. So engineering that in reverse, and then just slid the hand across and just choke the shit out. I liked how he also was super creative in the way he would do it. Like, he was using the mat to help hide his hand so that he couldn't get it. It was awesome. He wasn't in the proper position. He wasn't like in the perfect position to really get it in there and block it with his own head. So he's like, okay, I'll use the mat. The one that distinctly I watched, and I'm like, holy shit. Brown overreacts to Maia freeing his hand during the hand fight and just reaches up with his hand, and Maia just I mean, okay, I'm just gonna choke you now. The look on Brown's face when he notices that he made that mistake, the abject fear. He's like, oh shit, I'm fucked, it's over. Then he starts squeezing. He's still fighting the hands, and then he's like, he's got one arm. He's really essentially doing a one-arm rear naked on Matt Brown, and you see Matt realizing like, I'm out. It's done. That level of control, and we talked about taking advantage of the slightest mistake. Damian Maia causes you to make those mistakes, and if it's there, there is no escape. It's over. Between that and his actual back control, like we've seen him literally hold on to people from the back for rounds at a time, seemingly with just like minimal effort. And we know he was working hard. Obviously, we've seen him get tired, but the fact that he could do it when he's tired is even more impressive. Against some really, really good grapplers. And you mentioned George being underrated. I think Maia said he had the best jiu-jitsu in MMA that he'd experienced personally, or something along those lines.
Yeah, he did say that. Yeah, he did. I mean, like, and again, like, guys are able to survive, but usually it was fatigue related.
Squeezing the fucking blood and soul out of his goddamn face.
Oh yeah, that was crazy. I mean, like, there were guys that were able to survive. Like, I think Roy McDonald, had a close scare in round one. And that was one of those really bad Damian Maia kind of really gassed, not making any excuses, but he just gassed really bad in that fight. But yeah, man, the level of control and that Matt Brown, that was a great shot, by the way. That whole setup, I mean, Matt Brown getting punched on the way to the cage too. That was a crazy Brazil fight for the prelims there. But yeah, I watched enough of your game that I can attest. If I wouldn't have known you, I'm like, oh, this guy definitely likes Damian Maia. I could see your process both in grappling and MMA sparring alike. You get to that certain process, and it's boom. It's step 1, 2, 3, rinse, wash, repeat. It's like something looks like you've drilled like a billion times over. And I definitely am not consistent enough to do that, but I do love the process myself as well. As far as the first part, it's the finishing part I have a problem with. But yeah, I'm a big Damian Maia fan. He's pretty undeniable for this spot, for this list. I would say no matter where you put him, but it's like, no, he's got to be toward the top. Maybe he's not your number one, but he's got to be toward the top, right? So that is one strong opinion I will stand by. But all right, anything else to say on him? Otherwise, I'm going to go to listener lists.
Did you want to do your number? Do you want to go back to BJ Penn, your number one?
Yeah, I'll just add one thing that I think we forgot to say because we're incorporating back takes, standing, cranks, palm to palm, right? We're killer instincts, control. We're talking about all these aspects of the back, right? Arm trapping.
The cross leg, yeah. Also, the way he would do it, like cross it across both legs, across the waist. I was wild. I would love that. That's also only him.
Yeah, and well, even like that mount too just felt so powerful when he would cross his legs underneath it. And I don't know. Lately, I've been doing something with mine where I don't cross my legs, Ben. But I love doing this both in gi and no gi. It kind of encourages them to kind of turn to a hip to get a back, but like when you have that deep mount, and let's say you can go across your feet under like BJ Penn, flex your hips, your lower weight, right, where you're really flexing low into them, right? You're in that deep. But what I like to try to do and is doesn't matter which side, I guess whichever side is there you're comfortable. but I'll almost loop one foot up in between their legs to where the instep of the foot that's curling in, the top of the foot, I should say, is touching the inside of their thigh, high in their thigh. So it's almost scooping their ass up and them almost onto one hip like this.
Oh shit! That's
so
good.
they're not balanced, and you have a wedge between their leveraging point of their hips, right? And so they're kind of stuck so it's great for ground and pound, I think.
Yep.
I don't know. I haven't been in that position. But even in just gi and no gi, it's great because, if you got a gift wrap to help encourage it maybe, but you can really encourage that turn, it feels like. And some traps, whether it's a gift wrap or they really get to their side or something and they give you something stupid. But I don't know. But
it sounds like similar thing that I do, but yeah.
And it's just it's like something small and stupid, but like you know it when you feel it, right? And it's like an extra feel of, I don't know about control, but it's an extra feel of directional sensation. But BJ,
I did want to actually call Matt afterwards to talk about Maya too. No, you go ahead, BJ.
BJ, we didn't talk about the arm trapping, right? And that is something that we've seen.
And I realize you're right. We did.
I don't want to say he's the very first because I didn't scan every organization to see if there was like some Shuto fighter who was trying these things or whatever. But he definitely popularized it and started that trend, right? And I'm still waiting to see the more where it's evolved now to where you see like guy, you know what I'm talking about, Ben, where now you don't really see guys doing MMA yet, but where they do the arm traps where BJ would be more rudimentary where he's pinning the arm almost to the side, whereas now you're seeing jiu-jitsu guys almost lace the again, start hooking their legs so the back of their like the crook of their a leg where behind your knee where it hinges, it's almost hooking into the crook of someone's arm / upper forearm, and it's lacing in between there and the ribs, right? So it's lacing between your upper forearm, crook of the arm, and the ribs, and your shin ends up almost resting right on top of their kidney, right? Your shin almost ends up resting right on top of their kidney behind their back. So not only is their arm pinned, their arm is kind of pinned behind their back. I haven't seen anyone using those more advanced arm trappings that you'll see in gi and no gi in MMA. But again, like BJ kind of started this. You could credit him, right? He was kind of starting that motor for a lot of people as far as thinking, how can I trap some arms here?
Yeah, and I actually remember them distinctly pointing out. I don't remember which fight was when I was watching at BJ's, but it was they were talking about like, oh, watch out for the arm trap here. Oh, he's got it. I don't remember which one, but yeah, it was.
That was the Florian fight. Actually, I think it was the Florian fight.
It was a unique and distinct part of his game, and something that he popularized, and no one's ever properly, I feel like, done it as well as him. But yeah, let me pass it off to Matt a little bit to gush about Maya.
Yes. Joy in the house.
You can sit.
All right. I am now in the analyst chair.
Yes, let's go.
As is a shame for everybody else. I can't do it. Sorry. But yeah, so I assume we are now at the number one entry, Damian Maya. Am I correct in that?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So a few things I want to say about Damian Maya and why, as like Ben, I have him as my number one, is he brought a lot of technical innovations when it came both to taking the back and finishing from an MMA context, right? If anyone's watched the amazing BJJ Scout video series, he goes over his passing, but there's one thing that's a little missing in it, and it's most evident in the Ben Askren fight that he has. When Damian Maya passes to mount, he typically keeps one knee hitting the leg of the opponent down. The reason for this is it forces them to turtle, right? But unlike other turtles, Damian Maya is actually trying to force his opponents to post onto the mat and extend themselves out. In many sports jiu-jitsu contests and mostly in MMA, a lot of people are taught to take the back immediately. Damian Maya has eschewed that and has gone for more focusing towards different hand fighting positions. I know we talk a lot about the Dagestani handcuff.
Yeah,
it's a folk style wrestling ride. Damian Maya applies a lot of those concepts to his back takes and his rear naked chokes. The reason why he likes to get his opponents to post, and I think this is shown well, I believe it's Carlos Condit fight, but I might be mistaken. is once his opponents fully are able to post on the mat, they're more focused about shaking Damien off of their back using various hip bumps, which allows Damien to transition to the back triangle, right? Once the back triangle is locked in, and especially once you have the hands, it's very hard for an opponent to shake you off, right? That's a tactic more reserved for when you have a traditional seatbelt grip, as the top person's shoulder with the top seatbelt is more likely to be falling towards the ground. Damien Maia goes for these double underhooks and starts playing with the different wrist rides. So whether it's against, I think it was Ben Askren was one, where he's attacking the wrist rides and pulling them over the head so that he's able to get quickly for the rear naked choke. We talk a lot about Damien Maia's hand fighting, and while it's great, like if you watch the Matt Brown one, when he chokes him with one hand, he's actually doing a lot of wrist attacks and hand fighting before the opponent even flips over onto their back, right? He's bringing their hands over their head. If you've ever grappled in any context, whether it's in the gym, in a competition, once your hands are above, right, are above the perpendicular line between your shoulders and your spine, it's very hard to control, right? Pretend you're going for an Americana, right? Or if you're in mount and you're bringing your opponents up with both their arms in the air, it's very hard to bring their hands down to be able to be able to hand fight again. Damien Maia loves this tactic of bringing the elbows up, so once they grip here, they can't pull their elbow back down because he's under with double underhooks, right? Then he switches over for his attack for his rear naked chokes. He's a single rear naked as well. Another tactic he loves to use, right? In open space, we're seeing Damien Maia usually goes for like mounted triangle, right, against Chael Sonnen's one. But when he gets against the fence, he gives the opponent the option again of either standing up or posting their hands. I forget who it was. It's a very. Do you know who Damien Maia fought? The tattooed gentleman. Right.
You really narrowed it down.
Yeah, sorry. There's one. If you go to Damien Maia's top finishes, it's the last one on YouTube.
Lyman Good?
I think it was Lyman Good. That might be correct, right?
Yeah.
When he's against the fence, he allows his opponents to either choose whether standing up or posting their hands. It's never being able to fall to their side, right? And that's because he has the double underhooks, which makes the opponent feel like they have any sort of control. Anytime you go for your over-under seatbelt, your opponent is going to fall either typically towards your top shoulder side. He's controlling the middle torso, right? Which in theory allows mobility for his opponents, but it really only gives them one of two options. Standing up, which Maia is going to be able to take the rear naked choke because he's fighting against a person whose arms are going to be stuck down here, or having them post on the mat, attacking the under and the wrist so that when they fall over, one arm is over the head. He is the most technical back fighter, right? I don't think anyone would characterize Damien Maia as an athletic dynamo, right?
Yeah.
He's certainly not going to catch the type of rear naked chokes that Charles Oliveira will in a scramble, right? He's not going to blitz anybody to the back, which makes it all the more impressive that he's been able to develop a system that goes kind of counter to what you're typically taught in any wrestling room, any grappling room, any MMA room, right? You usually want to hold someone on the back right away and then fight the hands. He fights the hands and forces the opponent to fall on their back towards them, and has come up with his own system for doing that, right? It's a great way of showing how to control not only the tactics of a fight, but how to control the opponent's body without even going for the neck, right? I think this is a big thing that happens with grapplers is, right, they want to attack the submission point first instead of figuring out how to isolate it. And Damien Maia is the best at isolating the neck, and why I think he's far and away the best back taker and rear naked choke specialist in UFC history.
Dude, I hope all my listeners were taking notes. That was so awesome. I learned something there. I know I did, so I hope you guys did. As far as the rule of thumb, the principle I knew as far as where your arms are strong, but yeah, Damien doing that on purpose as far as to set up the deficit, the chase deficit before he even goes for the attempt. Like he's checking these boxes off. It's happening before the before before the check, forget the checkmate, even before check is even established, he's already on the hands and encouraging these movements to what Gioia said. That's fantastic detailing right there. Wow. It's all clicking in my head for all the footage I've watched, and I'm still going to go back and watch footage, so I encourage you folks at home too as well. But that all tracks here, man. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful details.
And another great entry he has is, everyone knows K1 Maya, but everyone's favorite Maya should be, single leg Maya.
Oh yeah, of
and
course.
That's another position that allows him to put his opponent's hands on the mat, right? Mm-hmm. Once somebody has a single leg, he's not really driving forward. He's going. I mean, I wouldn't really call it a sweep single, but he's always working towards his opponent's back, right?
Yep.
And you will always hear me gushing over Maya. He's one of the few jiu-jitsu and grappler guys who, I think he's probably the only one who's put together a game that all funnels into one position, right?
Yep.
There have been better grapplers in the sport, right? Especially more athletic ones, who have decided to use tactics that I would consider less than ideal. Shout out to my boy Jacare and his single leg, or if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
it's bad. But Damian Maia's entire game, whether it comes to his setup, his single legs, his passing, right? Whenever you see Damian Maia in mount, it's not to hold someone and smother them, right? It's to get them to turn, right? I think he is the blueprint for how every grappler should approach their game, whether it's not even his same tactics, but just always trying to funnel into one position, right? Once you become an expert in position, the way Damian Maia was with the rear naked chokes, I think it's only Masvidal that really fended him off. And I don't think if that's the Maia of maybe a year or two prior.
Anthony Rocco Martin deserves more respect. Okay? How fucking dare you?
Okay, I'm gonna
touch that one. Not even gonna touch that one.
Probably should.
All right, but this isn't prime Maia we're talking about, right?
Uh-huh.
I think one of the what ifs of MMA is what if Damian Maia just went purely for that for his grappling base, right? Just with the expertise he was able to show. I also want to put a shout out to Anderson Silva for his rear naked choke of Hendo. I think that's a real special one. There are a lot of great rear naked chokes, and also Nate Diaz punching Conor McGregor into the rear naked choke.
Yeah.
I think alone should
have one down. I'm gonna have to plug that one.
So what's funny? It's funny because he only has 2 RNCs. Can you believe that? It's him and Rob Emerson on Tough. Nate Diaz is only. Can you believe that? Do you guys believe that? That's his only rear naked choke wins in MMA history.
Which is funny because this is gonna sound ridiculous, but Damian Maia and Nate Diaz have inverted jiu-jitsu when it comes to their submissions, right? Damian Maia is either rear naked choking you or mounting triangling you, and Nate Diaz is either triangling you from his back or RNCing you. Both in completely different ways. But I think there is no greater setup for the rear naked choke than Nate Diaz on Conor McGregor.
Yes.
Punching him into... Sorry, aside from Damian Maia, because I'm not going to gush about him for 5 straight minutes and then immediately say it's not the best. That's probably that's probably not how I would do it.
Right.
Yeah, Damian Maia by far, right? The basic principles, I think, is
also him making guard pulling functional off of the single leg into the half guard pull is something that
again, best guard pullers in MMA. I'm your man.
Yeah.
Right?
Me and Damian Maia, best guard pullers in fucking MMA.
Get off me. Right.
But before you go, Matt, does your list change if this list is top 5 choke artists you would want to run you through an auto asphyxiation course? Autoerotic asphyxiation course, I should say. Damian Maia's got a nice voice. He's got a gentle. If you're nervous, you probably feel comfortable. Be well, I don't want to end up like David Carradine, but this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
As someone who frequently gets choked out by Brazilians, I think I'd like to taste the rest of the the rim.
You mean you want to cut?
I would like different. Like I'd like to see the different flavors of where you take a chokes based on different countries, right? Is there a different technique, right? Maybe I don't know.
How hard you get off?
What country has a good?
Choke? I don't know.
Where are you going with this?
I don't know. I don't know.
Doing.
I don't know. I just wanted to talk one more thing about.
Probably choke the shit out of you.
Khabib doesn't choke people. Khabib neck cranks people. That's different.
No,
Yeah, it is.
It ends up with the same result. You tapping to a back choke.
Well, I'm gonna pass this question on to Ben when he gets on here. So we'll get
But
this was great, Matt. Thank you for coming on and enlightening my ass about some technique, man. That was amazing. Not that that's hard to do, by the way, but it was just I was really impressed. That was beautiful.
Yeah, man. I just want to say one more thing. The back body triangle that Damian Maia has, right? The other part that Damian does, and I forgot to mention this, is right. He's constantly changing the angles of which his opponent's bodies is, right? I like to call this like the center alignment principle. Any strength-based move or any move that requires explosion requires your spine to be in a line. And this is something I want to bring up about his submission of Carlos Condit. You constantly see Damian Maia use the body triangle to pin the opponent's lower body in one place, and then use his hand fighting to twist his opponent's body slightly as he's going for the submission. Right, this is clear and evident in the Carlos Condit fight. It's another super way to stop any explosive movements. Right, Damian Maia was usually an explosive disadvantage and did not really like getting in scrambles. I think Ben Askren is the only fight there was really a lot of scrambles in, and he just used a heel hook to come up against another grappler who quite literally had a hip replacement right after. By twisting the body and preventing the spine from being aligned, right, it really limits the mobility of the opponent, and he, once again, cannot explode out and turn towards Damian Maia, right? A lot of the times with body triangles, especially when it comes from the back, is you want to be able to push off and hit quickly into the where the feet are to be able to break that lock. And by turning their hips and turning their chest so that they're facing two different directions, it kind of makes it impossible. So that's another tactic Maia uses. I recommend anyone, if you're really looking to get good at the back attacks, don't look at the choke. Look at the setup at how you're able to pin both the shoulders, the hands, and the hips. Those are the keys to the back, right? You're not Charles Oliveira. You're not just going to grab in a triangle. Trust me. All right, Dan. I'm going to let it go to Ben.
No, it's great.
Have me on, right? He can go talk about Rob Neer or Josh Neer or anyone from UFC 67. I don't care.
Is he throwing shade at how old we are at the end there?
He likes to remind everyone that he's very young.
He is young. I think he missed the autoerotic asphyxiations softball I threw at him.
I did not, and I enjoyed
I know
it.
you
I
did.
appreciated it.
I know you did. That's why I mentioned it.
That was impeccable timing yourself.
By the way,
talking about tactics.
We're gonna. By the way, we're gonna read off. We're gonna finish this off here,
please,
folks.
go ahead. Yeah,
and read off a listener list. But I will say, with the autoerotic asphyxiation, what I wanted to pass on to you, I was teasing Matt with. Of all these names we list, I want you to tell me which is the one fight. It's not going to be a very flattering award to win, by the way. But which is the one fighter that if they're like, if we woke up to the news and one fighter went the way of David Carradine, like it went out like a hero, right?
Okay.
The old autoerotic asphyxiation, they gone wrong, right? Which fighter would that be? Which choke artist would fall victim to the ultimate choke? If you know what I'm saying. All right. Jesus Christ, Dan. All right, Mr.
Do you have to pick from the list?
Yeah, well, okay. I'll let you give two choices then. But it's almost funnier if you're making a pick like from fighters we like, though, which is funny. We'll see, though. At Mr. Stitchface, at M Stitchface on Twitter. I like this dude. Says, have to post the obligatory Maia juicing Rick Story's head gif in celebration. Oh, poor Rick Story. Yeah, he's definitely getting mentioned today.
Yeah.
At Eating Writing, David Gonzalez says GM3. So you got some GM3 love there.
I'm glad we got some 2-3 love.
You know what? I don't know if he's replying to my guy Dan at Best Fight Picks, who's another jiu-jitsu guy. But Dan only gave 4 names, so maybe this name that David Gonzalez will be Dan's 5th. But I'll give you the 4 Dan gave. He gives BJ Penn, check. Charles Oliveira, check. Pantoja, check. Damian Maia, check. All pretty high-ranking guys, and guys you'll find somewhere on the list.
Yep.
Let's see here. Let's go down for more listener lists. All right, this guy hit us with a bunch. Paul Brown at BJJ Browner. I'm hoping that means you're a brown belt, or otherwise the Browner is another. Well, we can use our imagination.
It's true. It's a brown belt. There's no other reason. There's no other reason for that name. I really don't want it to be the other thing.
I know, yeah. That's almost worse than if I finally get my brown belt and saying who wants to go to Brown Town whenever I slap hands with people. You know, just to really make it awkward. Oh my God. Sorry, Ben. Look at Ben. Look. You're going to use that now, aren't you, Ben?
I'm not.
No,
I refuse. No.
You are a back taker. You ready to go to Brown Town? Sorry.
I'm going to get thrown out of the gym.
Out of the gutter.
We have strict rules against harassment.
All right. My new favorite handle at BJJ Browner says Escudero, Miller, Jury, Brooks, Poirier, Gaethje, all RNC'd by Dubronx. So he's signing off on the Dubronx pick there. Very nice. He goes, Askren, Good, Condit, Brown, Magny, Story, Quarry, McDonald, Jensen, all RNC'd by Maya. All right. Perez, Royval, Sasaki, Siri, my teammate, mate. Oh, nice. Shout out to you and your teammate. Moreno, all RNC'd by Pantoja. I'm guessing this person's Irish. Now I want to look up what Browner is in Irish slang to see if because the Irish are funny, man. They have to have something about that. Irish.
We could put out like a tweet and just go like, "Hello, Irish MMA fans, please. Can you let us know if this is a specific thing or if this guy's just shitting in his gi?"
Maybe I have to go watch. I'm gonna date myself with another. Maybe I have to go watch Al Pacino's Cruising to get some slang from the gay homies. Maybe there's something there for us to enlighten us. He also says Cowboy Oliveira, Tumanoff, Thatch, Cummings, Johnson, all RNC'd by Gunny Nelson. That's a nice shout, Gunnar Nelson. There we go.
Gunny Nelson. Yeah, that was that's a good point. Gunny is. I mean the absolute just domination at the hands of Damian Maia.
Yes.
while we're on topic,
because that was another skilled competition level black belt, right? For what it's worth, technically, right? And he knew the game. He knew what was coming. He knew that it's not much of a parachute cord, but it's your last resort. Was that whizzer? And you just saw that that eventually, when Damian Maia going from the under the ass underhook that you always preach, and then whenever he got deep, he would go and reach back to their belt line, like if you were grabbing the belt, if it was a gi, if they had the gi on, right? And that just eventually broke through Gunny's whizzer. That last barrier of defense. It was beautiful to watch. It was like an inevitable.
It's awesome. Like once you break through that whizzer, it's over, and it almost always works at that level of talent and skill.
I feel like Agent Smith from The Matrix watching that one, right? It's an inevitability, Mr. Anderson. Like it's not to fall into the Matrix bro crowd who people have broified that movie recently. I don't want to fall into that guy, but you know what I mean. It fits there. It fits. He just said, and he says, I think BJ Penn has the most high caliber hit list there. Fair enough. I mean, again, you could argue. I made the argument. You could argue BJ Penn.
Yeah, there's reasons for everybody.
Yeah, it's not really too crazy. I will say one thing off his honorable mention because I had him here. Ulka Sasaki. He is an RNC specialist who has the most losses by RNC. A lot of RNC specialists don't have losses to RNC, or some no losses by submission at all, right? Like Pantoja, Maia, right? These guys haven't even been submitted at all. BJ's
they're not gonna.
Right, yeah.
That's the thing.
So that was another thing was obviously something we considered an obvious thing. But Ulka Sasaki, there's a guy that Pantoja RNC, and that guy was an RNC specialist. But if you look, he's been RNC'd a lot as well, which is always kind of funny. So
that was part of the reason why I felt like Pantoja had really good names, but also a lot of them were like,
yes,
I feel like he could have gotten or should have gotten a submission with that much back control time.
Sure, so, absolutely. We'll go. Let's see. We gotta
have at least one Aljo mention, right?
Oh yeah, I hope so. Yeah, we'll talk about that too as well, because that was another thing. Well, I was afraid to mention him and burn him with my Brian Caraway selection because Aljo was one of the first names that popped in my head.
Yeah,
but he's got that head to head with Caraway, and his back take's probably more memorable. But Caraway finishes the next 2 rounds on. Or giving it to him from the back. A little
fish hooking.
A little fish hooking, right? Again, dirty motherfucker. But
Faber was dirty as shit.
Exactly. Yeah.
I got no problem with it. It happens.
But back to that level. Back to that head-to-head thing, right? I'm sure we'll talk about it here with. I don't know if anybody mentioned. I'll let them mention it. I don't want to mention it, but there's a lightweight one. One of my favorite submissions that I consistently get comes from my guy Alexander Volcara France at Volk.
It's a great post in response.
Great post, by the way. Yeah, follow that account, by the way. It's at
put some good threads.
Volcara. It's a shared K in Volcara France. So there's only one K in Volcara France. Make sure you follow him. He did the Vartanian Big Brain post, and he did another Big Brain post where it's the 2 guys arguing over Maya and Dubronx. And then the big brain is BJ Penn on Cabbage Canada Shoulder. So I was like, all right, that's great. But he says, serious. He has a technical note here. So, Ben, I know you'll appreciate it. He goes, serious. No top 5 for me, but I remember watching a lot of back mount footage a while ago. He says, I recall 5 key factors from fighters with an affinity for the Leo Mataleon. 1, stability. Kohn says, no worry about choosing between attempting a choke and maintaining mount. Okay. 2, positioning. Kohn says, hands close around the opponent's shoulder and head when an attempt isn't committed to. 3 is hand control. Kohn, consistently pin the defender's hands. Nothing wrong with that. Definitely. 4, chain submissions, adjust the grip and positioning of a bad RNC into a good RNC. All right. And then last, it says mandible choke. Along the jawline, effectively bypassing one of 3 defenses a defender has. That's what he says.
Yeah, and I definitely enjoy him posting this. And this is one of the things that I tried to point out, like, when we were kind of going through these lists, and we were talking about the things that we'd like to see during it. From rear naked choke, I guess experts is the way to put it, right? Guys who excel at this choke, and we're talking about the top 5 from a list of 10 to 13 names or whatever it might be. They're all going to be good at this. They're all going to be good at all of these things. They're going to be really good at maintaining their stability, advancing their position, and wrist rights and hand fighting. Not wrist rights. Attacking the wrists and hands and advancing towards the finish. These are things they're all going to excel at, and it's like he said, these are things he spots among all people who are really, really good at taking the back and controlling somebody in the back and working towards the finish. And why we were able to spend as much time as we were pinpointing specific things, like Meerschaert, for example, the way he advances his position by attacking the post or not needing to attack the post because he's moving the person, all the while advancing his hands slowly and surely around the neck and increasing the pressure he's able to put there as he goes. Or the way that the BJ Penn was using his own post, stripping the post to create his own post, right? Stuff like that, where we see the differences between what all of these guys display and finding the unique aspects to what they do, or like Matt was talking about with the specific way that Damian Maia was so proficient with his hand fighting, and the different methods he would utilize to take away the posts and ability to defend by his opponents. That's what makes this is what made this list so interesting and fun to go through, and why we see so many of the names repeated over and over again. People recognize what excellence is in this realm and what it should look like, and the different types of fighters that we see displaying that excellence in this particular context of mixed martial arts. That there are unique aspects or unique things that each fighter in these lists can do that make them stand out or seem special, or or I guess fighting against the odds, where they're not necessarily unique or special in most ways, but they were able to carve out that niche point that they can find success in. So this was a really, really good list to kind of like in very short form explain what you're looking for in a very, very high level rear naked choke artist.
Absolutely, and that chaining one sounds obvious, but sometimes that's underrated too. Just being a dog and going for it over and over again breaks down defenses too. You know, you fatigue people. But James Kendrick at Salvatore Stan one of my favorites, of course. An OG of here, this listener show. He says yes, his list, solid list here. Damian Maia, BJ Penn, Cal Uno, Takanori Gomi, Charles Oliveira. So Takanori Gomi's a guy I feel like he got choked more than he got choked.
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, I got to look back at that.
He was on a lot. He was a name that was choked out by a bunch of people that I was looking for in the honorable mentions too. Like I don't know.
Which by the way, I think that would be more appropriate, right, for the David Carradine list. Like, I know. Although, but I think the heavy hands guy is already labeled.
Marcus
Michael
Levisser.
Johnson.
It's Marcus Levisser.
Oh yeah, he does.
I think I said that correctly. That dude loved jumping into diving headfirst into guillotines more than anybody I've ever seen in my life.
There we go.
Who would be Poirier's favorite fight?
I'm glad James mentioned Cal Uno because that's the fighter that I obviously was referring to for like my hipster two-way tie at number 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And somebody again, BJ Penn has another head-to-head win over. Although he didn't, choke him out. Nobody choked out Uno again, as far as that goes. But Cal Uno, shout out to Capoza. That was one of his mentions too for the no arm. We'll get to here in a second with the no arm RNC or the no hook, I should say. I mean, not the no arm RNC. That's impressive. Wow.
I just rewatched it.
Yes.
The Ishida finish was insane.
Yes.
That was crazy. The way he took the back and finished that choke was. Like that alone, what made me almost put him on the list.
Absolutely, great shouts there, James Kendrick. Appreciate you, my man. Another good shout on Twitter at Diamond Elbows, and this is the one I'm glad I didn't step on because he brings up a good shout here. But he's got Maya, Aljo, Penn are obvious choices, but some appreciation should be to Kevin Lee. So
I have him on my honorable mention list.
So yeah. Aljo, what we said with Aljo is funny. It's like even though he's got some of my favorite submission finishes.
Corey Sandhagen.
He's got and even like non-RNC ones, like his finish at Takeya Mitsugaki is one of my favorite finishes of all time. That modified head and arm choke. But again, Brian Calloway's got the head-to-head loss against underrated guy, right?
Gioia.
And
we were talking about the Aljo's arm triangle from the side, where it was like kind of almost like halfway in guard. Oh god, that's so good. Our friend, one of the black belt, Gene from Dark Fight, he loves that. He's taught that before, and like we did a whole class, and it's such a good move. It's such an underrated move.
Yes, I've hit it in the room, but my goal is to hit it on camera / in competition because it's my favorite submission ever.
It's so good.
And but Michael Chiesa is like a guy that will probably come up, right? But again, he's got as good as he is.
David Carradine list.
Yeah.
I love Michael. First guy I'm beefing with Ben, so I have nothing but love for Michael.
Yes. That's actually a great pick. Actually, oh my god, that's a low key good pick. Holy shit! Holy shit! We're not wishing Michael Chiesa anything wrong, anything bad, and we're not judging if anyone's into that. By the way, that is just for fun, but that's hilarious. But yeah, he's got the head-to-head loss to Kevin Lee, right? And Kevin Lee he got away from it, but he had like 3 or 4 RNC finishes in a row, like Trinaldo, Magomed Mustafayev. He even like TKO'd. He got to Jake Matthews back. Jake Matthews, but it was a TKO finish, granted from a back rear mount. But he was rear mounting everybody, right?
He was an exceptional. Like he had that run of exceptional back takes and stuff like that. I remember the Trinaldo one was off a head kick rock, I believe.
Yes.
I think it was Trinaldo. So there were definitely some really fine finishes, but it wouldn't be enough for me to put him in the top 5 of all time.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's what I would say.
He's an underrated shout though, because that was his thing. That was his move, you know.
It's a great like sleeper shot.
He even mounted Tony Ferguson. Tony was just stubborn and was just taking the ground and pound from him
Okay,
instead
all
of
right.
turning to give his back.
Tony Ferguson.
I know that was Tony.
As much as I love him,
that was prime. I'm saying that's so impressive. He mounted. You know, people forget that they remember Kevin Lee losing to him with a triangle, but like he was pounding him from mount right in the first round.
Yeah, I think it's. I think Tony's guard being able to be sliced through by most people who are like that kind of caliber wrestler was offset by Kevin Lee having staff. So, you know.
But he was you know, as far as like this was UFC 216. You got to think of the time though. You know, this was still when, you know, you had people like me still being big Tony believers. You know, he didn't completely run himself into the ground and expose himself for all to bear in the most depressing runs ever at that point. Yep, Cal Uno, 13 of them on his record, and the Master of the No Hooks RNC. Shout out to my guy at Krabaka _Hitman. Of course, always appreciate him.
Legend
contributing. At Ro Mello Reyes says, forgot Jillian Robertson to shout her. That was a good shout I ever written down here.
She's another one that's on the honorable mention list. Excellent shout.
Yeah, I believe she's a woman's leader for RNCs, I want to say off the top of my head, for UFC.
I believe so. She's very proficient at it.
But Ro Mello Reyes, his list is, I'll give it a shot. We're taking, this one's active, so he didn't realize it was all time. But he says, number 1, Pantoja. Number 2, Brendan Allen. Good shout there. I didn't see a Brendan Allen shout yet. Number 3, Charles Oliveira.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 4, Jailton Almeida, the Jailman, baby. Jailman. Going to Pound Town.
I'm not doing it. I'm not doing that. We're not putting a heavyweight. I'm sorry.
No heavyweights.
I'm sorry. He's chosen his path. It's heavyweight. Nope.
By the way, shout out to
much better.
By the way, shout out to Fabricio Verdum's Poor Man Pantoja, where he would always do the deep half until a back take, where he's like just sitting up sloppily into it. You know what I'm talking about? Like, because all you need is like a decent deep half at heavy, and then you're just the rest of the way you've already got the beat on them because they're just so slow at that point. You've already got them beat. Like it was the most slowest. Like if you want to study like how to make deep half work on a rudimentary level, like you could break it down at super slow speed at heavyweight. It was great. He also mentions he's got a lot of mentions here. Patchy Mix, great shout for active fighters. He's still not done yet. Grant Dawson, say what you will about Grant Dawson, that is his specialty.
I will not say a lot about Grant Dawson.
Neither will I. Gunnar Nelson, Brent Primus, okay. Mansur Barnui, that's a cool hipster shout. Michelle Montague. Okay, that one's not coming to my mind, but it comes to his mind. Okay, good shouts though. I have to go look at Michelle Montague. I don't know why that's not coming to my mind. I'll see what it is. Of course, my guy Fenyo at Fenyo X Guy. Not top 5, but some that come to mind. So he's just naming some that come to mind. Maya, Gunny, Pantoja, BJ. Chucky, which I appreciate. It's Chucky Olives, not Charlie Olives. Dan Hooker, I love you, man, but if you're going to steal the MMA Analysis' nickname and not credit the podcast or the source where it's from, please get it right, because you're popular, and now you have a bunch of people saying Charlie Olives, which sounds fucking stupid. It's Chucky Olives. It's
Chucky Olives, and it's spelled Olives.
Yes, exactly. And Jillian, he gives a shot to Jillian, which was great.
Yeah.
And right now, someone who I feel is underrated, though not in the conversation for best ever, Brendan Allen. Great shout there, absolutely.
Yep.
Christopher at Aguiar MMA, what's up? I know Christopher is a supporter over there. Appreciate you, sir. He says, "Oh hell yeah!" In no particular order, first guys that come to mind: Maya. Then he lists BJ Penn. He goes bonus points for trapping arms in the body triangle. There you go. There's an arm trap shout. Dubronx, Kenny Florian, hipster pick, Brian Caraway, honorable mention Pantoja. Boy, Aguiar, me and you were like are right here, buddy. We're like pretty much like this. Look at that list. Holy crap. That's it right there. There you go. at Miguel Class, at Miguel Class, at Mig Class. Definitely follow him, support his stuff. He says, can't wait for the Damian Maya love. Hopefully we did you guys well, especially Gioia coming in with the assist. How about that alley-oop from you guys over there?
Listen, it was a planned event to have him here. It was not a planned event for him to go full Gioia, but you know what? That was nice. That made us both sit there and listen. That was awesome.
Absolutely. Is there any honorable mention? People respond to your post that let me see.
I don't think so. I mean, I think we covered pretty much everything.
Yeah,
the only person I want to make sure to shout out is Juicy Formiga. So.
Yeah, he's right on the top of my list here for that shout out yet. He's 9 out of 11.
Ken Shamrock.
Formiga, 9 out of 11. 9 submissions out of 11 submission wins. Luke Rockhold is a name that I put for honorable mention. Not that I'm big on him, but I just wanted to mention a middleweight who is deadly from the back. He mainly did ground and pound stuff.
I have him, but I didn't have enough rear naked chokes to really consider him for the list. So
or his one rear naked choke was mainly it was like a concussive elbow, like he already pretty much killed Lyoto Machida before he rear naked choked him.
He was dead beforehand.
He was already dead. A female that I wanted to mention shout was there's two. Obviously Zhang Wei Li. She's got like one of the closest, one arm kind of cool crucifix like style RNC kind of, I don't know if you want to count that, but I'm going to count that. And she's a really athletic, insane back taker. She too would be undefeated in fights where she got the back if the second Namajunas fight was scored for her. But Cynthia Calvillo, this looked like this was going to be her specialty for a minute. She has that sweet where she's in north-south on the bottom against Amanda Bobby Cooper, and she just bridges backwards into a back take. Kind of like, almost like the Craig Jones highlight. You're seeing a lot of his armbar highlights going around, where he does the backward invert and goes around to the back, and she does that. I know it's not, again, the highest level competition, but that's still really cool. And Cynthia was finishing a lot of girls when she came on the scene with the RNC.
Yeah, she was, but I just don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
For other reasons.
Sure. Kron Gracie, that's just a cheeky one. I think I saw him mentioned somewhere. I don't know why that didn't come up.
I did see him.
I think Neiman Gracie had some cool back take stuff as well, although he was beaten by a guy who has more RNCs, if you want to mention anybody by Bellator, which is Goiti Yamauchi. Even though he didn't submit Neiman, he did beat him twice, KO and decision, and he's got more RNCs in Bellator and otherwise than him. And yeah, they mentioned the Jailman, who I prefer when he goes to Pound Town than goes to the the RNC. Don't clip that. Clip it, Jesus. Yeah, there's enough shit in me clipped by friends and foes at this point. But yeah, I think hopefully we named everybody. I'm sure we did it. There's probably a few names that you guys are screaming at. Jesus, that was loud. You guys can.
If they're still screaming names, then I can't.
Hit us up. Yeah.
Yo, no, don't hit us up.
Well, hit me up.
There's 48 names. We got them.
Well, it's okay.
Trying.
Feel free to don't hit Ben up, but comment on the post and that this goes up on, so I get the interaction points. How about that?
Oh, in that case, yeah. Comment below who you think we missed.
I mean, that's the closest thing I'll get to.
Jason Reinhardt. Someone comment Jason Reinhardt. I want 4 comments of Jason Reinhardt.
There we go. Yes. I mean, that's the closest thing I'll come to rage baiting. You know what I'm saying, Ben? So I got to at least keep it in, I'm not a rage bait guy. I'm not going to go sit here and be like, I think this fighter's gay or something stupid. So, we got to at least keep it somewhat on topic. But to close it.
Thank you, MMA Guru.
So Michael Chiesa, if we're waking up to the news and one of these fighters took the choking stuff too far, Ben, Chiesa's your pick? Okay, I'm gonna look auto asphyxiation.
I know. There's gonna be some good beef jerky in the home though. So.
Ooh yeah, that is true. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna go with Jesus Christ. As much as I gave him love and went hardest for him for the hipster pick, I got to go with Brian Caraway. I feel like it's just like people forget about him. Like whatever happened to that guy? He looks like he's doing well, by the way. I wish him nothing but well. But you know what I'm saying? Like well, what happened? And he just pops up in the news one day. Would you be surprised?
No, no. I mean, yes, because I would have figured it would happen after Miesha Tate had a baby with.
That is true.
No disrespect, by the way. I'm just saying, if that was the time, if there was a time, that was the time.
Oh my God, that would have. Yeah, that probably would have. broken me harder than I've already been broken by the opposite sex, Ben. But for as fun as we're having, the truth is, you can say the same thing about us, so that's the funny thing about the joke. So on that note, Ben, thank you for joining me on this topic. Is there anything you want to say on that note before we get out of here, buddy?
No, thank you so much for having me. The thing I would definitely want to add is if you are able to donate to Tumen, our friend from the fight site. He is currently being held in detention, and we had to hire an attorney to get him out so that he could rejoin his wife. So anything you could do to help, that'd be great. Maybe we'll post a link below or something like that. I would definitely want to recommend.
I already got it to you. I've had the Tumen Legal Fund in all my show links for a minute now. So that's a great plug. Thank you for plugging that. I think me and Fenio, we haven't plugged it since the post-fight show. But yeah, please, it's I think it's like the first link on there. Tumen's Legal Fund for the GoFundMe there. Anything is appreciated, and it's one of the things I say when it's more important things you can give your money to. So let's end on that positive note. Thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully you dig it. Hit the like, subscribe, and all that stuff, whatever. But again, if you do have money in these tight times, the best thing you could do is what we just said. Go check out the legal fund I have linked below before all the other bullshit, because that's more important, to be honest. Ben, dude, this was awesome, man. I gotta get you back on, but I gotta get Gioia on for his own episode. Although that might have to be behind the paywall, because that might be a little risky, to put out in public. So, but I'll get him on.
Yeah, you definitely should. And thank you so much again for having me. I really appreciate it. Always fun to talk to you. And I would say have a good night. It's I think
morning over there for you guys. It's morning over here.
Late.
It's late. So I'm gonna let you go. Get out of here. Hopefully y'all had a good 4th of July weekend. We're safe. Didn't get burned by fireworks. And always protect your neck.